most companies go, we need a bunch of AI. And then what companies really need, almost always, it's just data is here. It needs to get there. There's a lot of companies want to fire their customer support team, replace them with an AI. I'm like, well, the problem with that is the customer support team is the canary in the coal mine. They'll tell you when there's a tech problem that's endemic. I'll tell you the biggest secret to AI. The best AI users are always women and they're always super high creative types.
Welcome to Artificial Insights, the podcast where we learn to build AI businesses by interviewing product leaders and innovators in AI. I'm your host, Daniel Maneri, and today I'm joined by Jonathan Green. Jonathan is an AI digital transformation consultant who helps businesses automate processes. He runs a program to train people to become fractional AI officers and has published a best-selling book on how to make money using ChatGPT called ChatGPT Profits. In addition, Jonathan hosts his own podcast talking about AI called the Artificial Intelligence Podcast, and it ranks in the top 2% globally. Jonathan, could you tell us about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Jonathan Green. I'm the host of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast, and I've been in the AI space for quite a long time. I'm basically a digital transformation consultant to help people understand how AI can be useful for their business and all the use cases where it's really not useful and it's just a distraction. And I've been working for myself since 2010 when I was fired in a blizzard, and I live on a small tropical island in the South Pacific with 5 kids.
That sounds like a fun career change. So I like to ask on a podcast like this, I think a question that's on everyone's mind is, Jonathan, are you an AI?
No, I'm human. I don't really like technology. I'm actually quite the Luddite. I only use it for work. So if I'm not working, I'm not online. Like my phone, I never have the sound on or the vibration on. I often leave it in my bag. So very rarely do I use it. I don't use like voice chat with any AI. I've never talked to Bixby or any of the other like AI voice chats or Alexa. I don't have any of those things in my house. I very much like to be outside on the beach, like live in my real life. So I just use AI and tools for work, but overall, I'm human.
Nice. I found it super freeing in order to disconnect and have boundaries with work, not to be using technology when I don't need to. You mentioned, I think you started at Blizzard. Is that the giant company that makes games, or was it
No,
being
I
fired
lost my
in a
job.
blizzard?
No, I was fired in a blizzard from
Okay.
teaching at the university. So I lost my what I thought was my dream job at 29 years old in a massive snowstorm.
And what was that job?
I was a professor at one of the top 25 universities in America, and I hated it. I hated it so much. They, you think that it's your dream job, and it's like careful what you wish for. I was like, wow, this is all passive aggressive. This is all. My boss was like, yeah, most people who get a job here never leave, and I was like, is that a threat? Like, that's how I heard it, right? It was like and it's like you get caught in these massive machines of bureaucracy. It's very similar. As companies get bigger and bigger, you get tons of people that do nothing. Like we've all seen those TikTok videos of people who say, this is what I do all day, and they literally do nothing and they get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. And they're like, yeah, I go here and I get a massage and then like look out the window and then I do something to a spreadsheet, but you can tell they don't know what they're talking about. And it's like, that's what it's like at large universities is you just have all of these positions that are filled by people that are very much into politicking. And there's a lot of infighting and passive aggressive, like other people would come by and say things to me like, oh, wow, you got a new chair. And I would go, well, actually, there was no chair. So I didn't go from old chair to new chair. I went from no chair to a chair, which is very, very, very different. And they would make these little comments like I'm like the golden boy. And they go, oh, look, they got you a computer. And I go, well, there was no computer in the office when they hired me. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't really know how to answer that, right? It wasn't like they were buying me like an awesome computer. They were buying me the most basic MacBook at the time, like an $800 computer, but became this huge thing. And then when I asked for a mouse, that was a whole thing. And they're like, oh, you're too good for the touchpad. I was like, well, I'm here 8 hours a day. So, and stuff like that. And then you just have to, they give you projects. They say this will take you like 6 months and it would take me like an hour. And I go, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stretch an hour. I can stretch an hour into a day. Maybe I can do that, but not an hour into 6 months. And you realize that what everyone's doing is make work. And it's this competition to see who can fake it the longest and it just wasn't for me. So when they let me go, they really freed me. And within a few months, I was making my boss's salary, and within a year, I was making her boss's salary. So I don't regret that at all. They didn't destroy my life; they freed me on accident.
And I hesitate almost to ask, but did it matter what the thing you were a professor of was?
No, it had nothing to do with that. So it was applied linguistics. So I was teaching English as a foreign language. I was in charge of like a multi-million-dollar project and like I was in charge of 6 other teachers. So I was only teaching one class a week. I was in management, but it just had nothing to do with that. It just wasn't the right fit. And I was so happy to get out of there. Like I was like, I know I would have never quit. And just that sometimes you have to be kicked out of the nest.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a few career transitions in my life that have been wonderful and not something I would have chosen ahead of time. So I like to hear those stories. And from there, how did you get into AI?
So I've always been in tech and online business stuff. So I was dabbling with a lot of AI tools in the late teens. And then, a lot of the tools I was using, they just weren't ready for prime time until ChatGPT 3.5. So I was using a lot of AI tools. And then that came out and everyone was teaching how to use ChatGPT and they were posting these YouTube videos and they stank. I was like, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about. They would give you these tutorials and say, ChatGPT can't do that. And I go, I bet it can. And they'll say, this takes 13 steps. And I would say, I bet I could do it in 3. So I developed my own systems, wrote my own prompts, and did a lot of like customization. And I started sharing what I was doing. And my results were so far ahead of everyone else that people were like, well, how are you doing that? Can you share your prompts? And that just started adding that to what I began teaching. So I just began teaching what I was already using in my business. So I wrote my book, ChatGPT Profits, and there's a lot of books out there on ChatGPT that are written by ChatGPT. The most popular one is trash. It sells thousands of copies every single month. It's a top book on Amazon on ChatGPT, and the person who wrote it knows nothing about what they're doing. Almost every prompt in the book is fake or non-functional,
Whoa.
but they got a bunch of fake reviews and they took it over. And I said, well, I want to make an instruction manual that works. And so my kind of rule is that I'll only put in prompts in the book that have made me money in the past 6 months. So every single thing I teach is something I made money from. So that kind of created a clear, bright line as opposed to saying, ChatGPT, just write me a bunch of trash generic prompts in a book, which is what the other person does. They made a lot more money than me though. So there's a lot to be said for giving people stuff that doesn't work.
And marketing. You said, I think you left your last job in 2010, and here we are about 15 years later. You didn't start out with ChatGPT, obviously. So what are the other things in there that got you towards that?
Yeah, I started off, first thing I did was I started an SEO agency. So I was selling SEO and video marketing services to small and medium businesses right out the gate as soon as I lost my job. From there, about a year and a half later, I began teaching people. So I went from doing to teaching, saying, here's how I started agencies, here's how I find clients, here's how I deliver the services, all of that stuff. And that allowed me to be more scalable because I wanted to be location independent. So I didn't want to be trapped where my clients lived. And that allowed me to move. And so I got into that space. I've done a lot of product creation. That's what I got well known for first. I made products for a lot of really big companies and a lot of big brands and a lot of partnerships. So I did that for a while until around 2016 when I began to release products under my own name.
Hmm. And by products, you mean building
Digital courses. So
digital
I
courses?
create digital training courses.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned a few times now moving from building something to teaching people. And as a professor previously, I guess, is that a natural step for you, or is there's something in there that is different?
It's just different in scalability. So if I make a course, I can sell it, whether I sell it 1 copy or 1,000 copies, it's the same amount of work to create it. Whereas if you're working for a client or doing a service, you're selling your time. You can only do one-to-one, one task at a time. So it gives me a great deal of scalability and a lot more freedom. So I love selling courses. I like building out that audience. That's really my main passion. And then everything else kind of surrounds that now.
Hmm. For you, what's the business then that's taken off the most specifically around AI? Is it a course or is it something else?
Yeah, so I've made a bunch of courses over the past few years teaching different aspects of AI from image generation to delivering services. And a bunch of people And my classes were like, "Oh, it's so hard to find clients." And I said, "Well, let's find out." And I said, you guys are calling me out because I've been teaching client generation, and I started closing clients the first day. So as soon as I said, I started closing more clients and getting more projects that just because I said, yeah, I'm open to taking clients. So the reason most people can't generate clients is inaction. So I've always taught different like service methods. I believe in risk management. So I always have something I do that makes me money in the long term and something I do that makes me a lot of money up front, which is doing some type of client or service work. That's the advantage. You make less money, but you make it faster. And I've been a ghostwriter for a long time. I've written a lot of business books, and when I teach people how to be a ghostwriter, they go, how do you find clients? I go, well, how many people have you told you're a ghostwriter? Nobody. Well, then how's anyone going to find you? It's so common. And the number of people who are AI consultants who say but don't tell anyone, or they just they're because you're afraid of rejection, so you don't take that action step. If I don't tell anyone and I fail, then there's no judgment. But it also guarantees failure. So you kind of trap yourself.
And personally, then for you, is there a way that you ensure that you don't fall into that trap?
Yeah, I mean, I just tell everyone what I do. Like I don't make it a big deal. I kind of find that people who are weird about what they do, you could really lose. I met someone one time who like wouldn't tell me what their job was. I had to ask them for like 5 minutes, and their job was actually something really cool. And I was like, but because they were so weird about telling me, I was like, wow, I really don't respect this person. They collapsed. I was like, it's a way, it's, I was like, this person must have no self esteem or no communication skills, but it can't, it read as no self esteem. And like, lack of self confidence is very unattractive. We all know that. We all hear that all the time. So if someone says, "What do you do?" and you go, "I work," where do you work? At a company. By now, you hate the person, so they're being cagey, right? So if you don't want to tell me that, either you hate your job or you hate me, and either way, I don't want to be friends with you. So the all of these fears we have, which is, oh, if I tell someone, and the thing is, yeah, if you tell everyone, you might fail. That's true, and then people might judge you. But here's a secret: nobody actually cares that much about you. Like I get announcements every day on LinkedIn for people that have been hired and fired. I don't care. I don't go through and look at each person and judge. This person was fired, lower them. This person was hired, raise them in my estimation. I don't do that, and nobody else does. So it's just an imaginary worry that no one has time to worry about you that much.
It is tempting though. LinkedIn makes it very tempting. And to shift gears a little, what is it that you do now? Because I know you do things with agents and the courses as well, but I'd love to hear about those two things.
Yeah. So the courses, that business, my B2C business, my business to consumer business is really fully autopilot. Once people download one of my books or take a free gift or go through one of my quizzes on my website, they get automated emails and automated trainings and workshops for like 6 months showing my different products, my different courses, and tons of information and access to all sorts of things. That complete takes care of itself. So that's really an automated business. Mostly what I do now is consulting, and a lot of that is it's mostly automations. Very little of it is AI. Most companies go, we need a bunch of AI. And then what companies really need, almost always, it's just data is here, it needs to get there. We have somewhere where the river of data is dammed up or clogged up, and it's not connecting. So we're recording all of our phone calls and making transcripts and doing nothing with them. Or we have all of this data stored in an old warehouse, or we have all of our data in one software, but it's not connecting to another. That's 90% of what I do. The other two things, it's usually has to do with email. We have so many emails coming in. We need a better way of sorting the good from the bad, what we need to respond to with an AI. And then the third area is usually they want something to do with social media or customer support, something to do with interfacing or kind of being a barrier between them and their customer base. And I usually have to work through that process to make sure they don't do something that's going to damage their business. There's a lot of companies want to fire their customer support team, replace them with an AI. I'm like, well, the problem with that is the customer support team is the canary in the coal mine. They'll tell you when there's a tech problem that's endemic, or that's your first warning that there's a problem your team hasn't caught yet. So if you're not paying attention to that, what happens if you don't give people good support? Then they start complaining in your community. Then they start complaining on Twitter to the world and like tagging you in it. So the problems get more and more magnified if you don't catch them early on in the complaint cycle.
And What would you say the definition of an agent is then?
So an agent, the problem with AI is that all of our definitions are different. Everyone has a different definition of agent. So I usually tell people that I build machines. So if I'm building a process like an automation, it's a multi-step process. There, each component, if there's an AI component, then the AI might have a personality. So this is a data researcher, this is a data analyst, this is a market researcher. So they have different skill sets and they're part of something. They're basically beyond a chatbot. So they're like that next level of a chatbot. They can take some actions, whether it's searching the internet or writing an email. So they can do a little bit more. So when I say agent, that's usually what I mean.
Hmm. And I like what you mentioned about giving them personalities. And to me, that feels a little bit like saying there's a set of skills and tools needed to do this role, maybe some processes, some access to data. How do you think about that?
So when you're creating an agent, when I create an agent, my theory is really about it has to be anchored. So you can always tell when I can always look at an agent's coding and see who built it. So if it's a programmer, it's usually designed to have no personality and to just obey and to do a certain function. The problem with that is that you're losing 90 to 95% of what makes AI useful. You're basically programming out the creativity, the usefulness, the problem solving ability. So it won't, if you don't specifically tell it to solve the problem in a certain way, you're basically, the most important value of AI is that when used correctly, it eliminates the problem of garbage in, garbage out, which is the first thing I learned in computers, right? When I was a kid,
Mm.
way, way long ago in early in the 1980s, the first thing they said is if you give it a bad instruction, you'll get a bad result. And AI solves that, but I see a lot of AI theorists, and this has happened to me a couple of times. They'll take one of my theories and they'll update it to reintroduce garbage in, garbage out. So you have people that constantly want to reintroduce the problem that AI solves. And that happens, it's always programmers or researchers writing a white paper. So a lot of like modern AI theory by these people say, well, when I put this prompt in, if you prompt in a certain structure, you take away AI's ability to tell you, hey, your prompt is broken. And then they go, well, this AI is so dumb. And it's like, yeah, you told it to be dumb. So it's mostly they find a way to take away the problem solving ability and then write a bad prompt. So it's a two-layered thing. And it's very, very common. And there's a lot of people that are pushing that theory. So I come from a different school of thought, which is much more organic because it's called Chat GPT. Chat's in the name. So you be chatty with it, not program. It's not program GPT or code
Mm.
GPT or Python GPT. So when I'm creating a character, I do all of the elements that make it very human. So I wanted to have a picture, a personality, a gender, an age, an ethnicity, a personality type, a language type, all of those things I program in because I really want to get a sense of who I'm dealing with. And if you have a bunch of agents and you don't do that, you'll forget which one's which. If this is just social media
Mm.
bot and email bot, it will cause you to prompt worse and communicate with them worse because you've dehumanized them. So you'll get worse results. You'll actually, the problem isn't how the AI responds, it's that you'll become, the way you act will be worse and you'll be like, I can't remember which one is which and which one I'm talking to. So if you're talking to my TikTok agent, you know because she is annoying. And how do you know that? All TikTok people are annoying. If you've ever met, they speak and think in 7-second increments. So that's intentional. And if you talk to my Twitter agent, well, that one's also a lady, but she's a little older and she speaks with a lot of emojis and she speaks in 140 characters spots. So she speaks one sentence at a time because that's how Twitter people think, or X people, I guess it's called now. So as you do that, then you can remember which one you're talking to. So it's really about
Mm.
that anchoring. But I also go much further. I create psychological personality profiles. I create logic chains and skill trees because if you create an agent that's good at everything, then it will just be okay at everything. It has no expertise. So all those things are part of it and it's all connected. And you can kind of create, how does it talk? What kind of language does it use? Is it serious? Is it casual? And all of these things lead to really, really powerful results. So very consistently, the agents or the bots or the prompts I create outperform the baseline. And that's really all I care about. So
Mm. Going back a little bit to one of the first things you said was AI solves the garbage in, garbage out problem. And I think you're right. That is a school of thought that isn't the most popular school of thought. What do you mean when you say that? How does it do that?
Sure. If I ask a stupid question or if I misspell a word, then ChatGPT knows what I meant. So if I was programming, I grew up on MS-DOS. If you say change directory and you capitalize a lowercase letter, it goes, there's no file with that name. There's no directory with that name. So there's no room for variance. Now you can misspell a bunch of words. You can have your words out of order. You can say what you want poorly, but it has a wider ability to figure out what you meant rather than what you said. Now, you have to switch ChatGPT into interrogative mode, which is you have to give it permission to ask you questions. So if you say, "Here's what I want to do. Ask me questions if you need more clarification," and then you go through the process, it will then tell you. But if you don't do that and you stick to the command obey structure, which is you tell it what to do and you want it to obey. The best example of this is like the master prompt, the main prompt I teach, I call this a master prompt is this is my goal. What information you need from me? So I say, I want to write a blog post about swimming. What information you need from me? I want to I want to create a folder on my computer that whenever I put an image in it, it puts a blue border on it. What information you need from me? And it will go, are you on Mac or PC? First question we'll always ask, right? Because that's the important question. Or are you using Linux? So that's the first thing it will say, right? And if you don't tell it that, then what it will do is give you instructions for every different type of computer. We'll try and answer all the variants, or we'll try and guess what type of computer it thinks you're on. And if it has permission to ask questions, we'll start asking those questions. And what you can see, the reintroduction of garbage in, garbage out happened when someone wrote a paper that's derivative of my theory called chain of thought. And the idea of chain of thought is
Mm.
that you create a 7-step process. And the people who wrote the chain of thought paper made a massive mistake. Their paper is really embarrassing because they said, what if we create a problem that will collapse 30 minutes into a task? So what they wrote out was instead of having the AI create the set of steps, we'll write the set of steps, and they're detailed. It goes do step 1, then do step 2. If you make a mistake in step 7, let's say now your human error is 7 steps in, you won't find out, and the house of cards won't collapse until you hit step 7, or even maybe it's 8 or 9 when you do a step that builds on top of it. And the reason their theory, right, their whole idea was because it makes you get a better result if the prompt is written perfectly. And they never factor in that really dumb assumption. So that's the problem with most like theorists, most people that are computer programmers is that you're trained to have a perfect prompt. Well, most people can't do that. So what you're doing is you're creating a process that only works in ideal situations. It's the same thing economists do. Like everyone only makes logical decisions at the grocery store. Have you ever been to a grocery store? Like it's all bad. It's all theoretical math that doesn't work in the real world. It's great on paper. So the solution to that is to say, here's my goal. You design the chain of thought. Tell me the series of steps that will get us to the goal that's most likely to hit my satisfaction of the goals I want to hit. And when you write it that way, now the AI writes the steps. And you know what that means? No mistakes. So one simple modification so every time someone rewrites one of my theories and makes it worse, I just write a new version that solves that problem, which is every time you take away control and you do more of the work, you increase the odds of failure. And that means that more and more people have a bad experience with AI. So that's one of the big problems. And that's what a lot of people are doing, a lot of these cutting edge theorists. It's the same thing you see every time there's a new model that comes out. You'll see all these graphs about how this one does 1% better on the SAT and this one's 0.05% better when you ask it math questions.
Yep.
I saw someone posting today. They were so excited that a new AI model can solve a riddle. And I wrote back, I said, when's the last time you were in a riddle based emergency? When's the
I
last
like
time
that
someone
metric.
told like, when's the last time you were in a triangle-based emergency? Like, oh, I've never had to do trigonometry. I've never had an emergency where they were like, solve for the area, right? Or, right? The room is on fire, solve for the area to escape. Like, none of those things are useful in the real world. So you'll see all of these graphs, and they're always rigged. If you look closely enough. So I don't want to get too specific and hate on too many companies, but you can always tell when a new release of a model is terrible because they'll only compare it to previous versions of their own model. So let's say this is better than version 3 and 3.2. And it's like, oh, why aren't you comparing it to any of the other models on the market? Or I saw someone today, they were comparing a model to a bunch of open source models I'd never heard of.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, I wonder why they're doing that. And what they'll do is they basically want to make the graph or the bar chart that makes them look the best. So there's no consistency in those. And if there's a test, and sometimes if you look closely, I saw a big one. There's a big release from one of the major companies, and they showed that their new model was 0.01% better in one metric than another one. I said, "Oh, that's amazing." That's like me saying to my wife, "Oh, it looks like you've gained 1,000th of a gram today." It's an undetectable amount of difference, and it's a difference without a distinction. So a lot of what happens is that there's so many things out there in AI that are announcements that are distractions because they're completely useless. They have no value in the marketplace.
Yeah. Honestly, I have mostly stopped following AI news because of that. I think one of the biggest ones was the one that introduced reasoning. They trained on some secret data set and were like, wow, look how good this is. And then I tried just asking it a simple question and it blew up. That's
Yeah,
just
so
too hype.
no, all reasoning is my chain of thought prompt incorrectly applied. That's exactly what it's doing. The whole point of chain of thought is that it tells you the steps and you can say, "Oh, you've made a mistake." For example, when you ask it to write a blog post, it might say at step 9, look for the keywords. It's like, no, you do that before you write the article, not afterwards. So what happens with a lot of these reasoning models is that they're running a chain of thought model, and it's part of its derivative of what I wrote about, not all of it, but they don't show you the thinking, which means you don't. So what's the point of saying show your work, but then I'm not allowed to see your work? It eliminates the ability to correct midstream. Other tools do show the reasoning part, but most reasoning models, that's all that they're really doing. And the big mistake every AI company making, they're all making the same stupid mistake, which is that they say to you, "Hey, we have 50 AI different models. You choose which one you want to ask a question to." It's like, "Hey, dummy, why don't you hire an operator? So I'll tell you the question and you assign it to the AI that's the right amount of money." If OpenAI did this, they would be saving several $100 million a year.
And as someone who's done a bunch of open source models personally and used them in a bunch of cases, is there a reason to think about the model behind it, or would you prefer not
Yes.
to?
Depends what you want to do. So let's say you write romance novels. Well, ChatGPT will not do the dirty scenes. And as my wife says, then what's the point? So you can also AIs are programmed to have the biases of whoever programmed it. So there have been a lot of studies that show you can tell which political party someone belongs to by their AI. There's AIs that will write a poem about one political party, but not the other, or one gender, not the other. And the whole idea of AIs is that they're supposed to be objective, and then people put their thumb on the scale. This is why Google got in trouble multiple times. So they try so hard to, what is it, like solve for a social problem that they create an AI that's like, I guess massively racist is the best word. Because if you ask it to draw a picture of a Nazi and it draws a picture of a Nazi of the wrong ethnicity, that's a pretty big deal. So when they start messing around with politics or social stuff, you eliminate the most valuable part of the AI, which is that it doesn't have an opinion. AI does not care what race you are, what gender you are, because it doesn't know. And it's like, yeah, why is that interesting? So it doesn't, unless the programmer starts adding that in, and that's always leads to a collapse of the model.
I saw even yesterday on Reddit someone posting a picture of DeepSeek and responding in real time because it was still doing that, and it was just getting censored. It would give you this huge list of things like, Taiwan's a country, et cetera, and then it just said, "Oh, sorry, I can't answer that question." Like it would change in real time.
Yeah. So you can always tell what country a model's from if you ask the right question, because there's certain things that other countries don't care about certain things that are really important to Americans. They just don't care about those things at all. They never come up. And that's why, AIs made in other countries have different set of rules. So you can tell if it's a Chinese AI because the things it cares about are very different.
And I want to go back to one of the things you said about making agents, which are, I think you said, skill trees was one of them.
So I create a personality profile. I create a skill tree. And basically what I want to create is here's what you're good at, and here's the order in which you're good at it. So you can say you're a professional basketball player. Well, are all professional basketball players good at the same things? No. There are some players who are better at rebounds and other players who are better at 3 pointers. So you have to create the skill chain of here's what you're best at. You're great at basketball first, you're great at free throws. Like, then next is you're really good at three pointers. Then after that, you're good at rebounds and you're good at defense. And now you create a chain of skills, which are all connected, but you're creating them in an order. So that means you can create two agents that operate differently because the skill chains are different orders. I do this when I make a copywriter. Some copywriters are great at headlines and some are great at writing the middle of the letter, right? You have different things. Some copywriters only write sales letters and some only write emails and some write video sales letters. So when you start thinking about how there is a uniqueness, the skill chain is really, really important. So that's the skills. Basically, it's by category and then the order of like skills within that category and like the order of your excellence, and it will change the result. And creating a personality is really important because you anchor. A lot of people talk about
Mm.
they call it hallucinating, which is a stupid name for lying. So it's like, oh, if a computer lies to me, it's just hallucinating. And I tried that on my wife. And I was like, I didn't lie. I just hallucinated. Turns out it doesn't work, right? So we create these like silly rules, and an AI will tell you when it's hallucinating if you ask it correctly. So one of the things that I do is you always know when you're talking to an agent I built because it will start and end every answer with a different emoji. So when I create one, what will happen is the first thing when it starts to drift or forget the core prompt, the emoji will disappear. And that's your warning. That's your canary in the coal mine. That's your warning that after here on out, it's going to start to make mistakes. Because if you wait for it to be noticeable, for you to notice that it's being weird, you're probably 3 or 4 prompts too late.
Mm. And what difference does it make to the AI itself to give it like a list of skills versus part of what you said was it's different to you as a human to know I'm interacting with TikTok versus Twitter.
Yeah, that's the personality part. The skill chain is the expertise part. So the skill chain will get you a massively different result. So you can ask two AIs with two different skill chains the same question, and the result will be significantly different.
Is there any best practices around a skill chain? Because I would feel like naively, I would want to define a skill as something more low level than just writing headlines. And even then, writing a headline is something that's very specific. So I would want a copywriter bot. So how do you think about what is and isn't a skill?
I don't care. I only care what the AI thinks a skill is. So it doesn't matter what I think is a skill. It matters what in its core programming it considers a skill. So if I say add a skill to the skill chain and then the AI's opinion it's not a skill, then it doesn't work, right? So what I do is I have the AI, I always have an AI create all of the different parts of the like agent that I'm building. I'll say. So one of the things that I use is emojis. I use emojis a lot. I don't know what any emojis mean. I'm too old. I grew up on emoticons, right? So I do like semicolon and then the letter P to mean like I'm winking and sticking my tongue out. But nobody under 40 knows what that means. That's like old way of using the internet, right? But there used to be this like game show on a television show where they would show you like a bunch of images and you'd guess what it means. Like this is a bee next to a wall, and it's like, oh, that means B Rick. The guy's name is like whatever it is. Like you'd solve it like that. So you can actually, because when you're creating an agent or a prompt, you have to be as efficient as possible. Well, emojis are very, very efficient language. So I can say, describe this person using only emojis, and we'll write a sentence. It's meaningless to me. It's machine code. It's a shortcut to machine code. When you think about two machines in the matrix talking to each other, they're speaking in emojis, right? It's not just screechy noises. What this means is that I can add in a sentence to anchor what this person's expertise is. And the way you check it, it's just like if you want to check a translator, you say, translate into Japanese, now translate back to English. And if the response is correct, then you know it did it well. That's okay, check it. So I'll open up a new conversation or talk to another AI and say, what does this sentence mean? And I'll paste it in and it gives me an accurate result. So I've done it for all sorts of things like this is an HVAC expert. And the images mean they don't really make sense until it explains it. And then when it explains it, you go, wow, that's really cool. So you can get a huge amount of value in a very few amount of characters. So efficiency is very important. And I always have it summarized. I'm like, write this answer as few characters as possible. So instead of saying copywriter, it might say CPYWRT, like copywriter, whatever. And I have it do its own abbreviations. I don't write the abbreviations because it doesn't matter if it means it to me. It matters if it means it to the AI. So as you start to create, because I've hit the 8,000 character limit on agents many times when I'm creating like ChatGPT, GPTs. So you have to go, how can I use less characters? When I create an ocean personality profile, there's like 50 numbers in that. If you let the AI go wild, it will describe what each number means, but it doesn't need to know. You can just say OCEAN and then 10 numbers, and the AI knows exactly what it means. And it creates the personality type. And it is very, very good at it. Like
Mm.
way better than you'd think at creating personality. So if I say, if I just asked it to create an ocean personality profile for you based on like a couple of your podcast episodes, and then you went to like a therapist and did the test, the result will be like 99% the same.
Wow.
So it's very good at that.
That's super cool. It sounds like one of the major principles is let the AI describe the AI.
Yeah, I always want the AI to do all of the work. So here's the biggest secret. I'll tell you the biggest secret to AI. The best AI users are always women and they're always super high creative types. And I can tell you there's a couple of things that someone will say that I know they're a master prompter. So maybe there's men out there that do this. I just haven't met one, but I've met quite a few women that do this. They'll say something like, here's the things they'll say. Number one, they've always named the AI. So they'll say, oh, this is George or this is GPT bro or whatever it is. Some give it a girl name, some give it a boy. It doesn't matter. If they give it a name, like a friendship name, there's a very good chance they're a genius. And number two is they will think they're bad at AI. Always. They always go, oh, I'm not a very good user. And then you ask this question, you go, oh, how often do you get mad at the AI? Oh, I've never gotten mad at the AI. Really? Right? Be honest.
That's a good
How often?
metric.
Yeah. Because I get enraged all the time, right? I go off. We all do. So, and then I will say, how often do you get the right answer? They go, what do you mean? It's always gives me the right answer. So they'll say things like they don't know. It's like they don't know that that doesn't happen for other people, and I know a lot of ladies, they do this, and they don't like to talk about it because they think they sound like they don't realize that how smart they are because it's designed to speak in communication language, so high communication types, people who are very good at communication, are very friendly, do really well. So sometimes they'll say, "Oh, before I do any work, I start talking about my day to my friend, and I say, 'Oh, here's what I did today. I mean, my husband had a fight, but we worked it out,' and all of these things, and they're a little bit embarrassed, and I'm like, "No, that means whatever you're doing, my job is really to try to translate what they're doing into something that's repeatable for other people that I'm teaching." But every single time I meet someone who super creative type, like an artist or some type of designer or photographer or whatever, they design or they prompt in this particular like super chat. Like they really are high chatting, right? Like it's the highest level of chatting. And I always think, gosh, can I imagine if I always got the answer I wanted and I never got mad at the AI? Like what a world. I would love to live in that world. I get mad at least once a week. So I go, because they don't want to tell you because they think that I'm like, because at first they think they're like, you're judging. No, you're a genius user. You're a one percenter and you don't know it. And then I on it. So I try and elicit that. That's how I've developed a lot of my prompting theory is I say, well, how do you talk to it? What type of things? How often do you compliment it? What kind of language do you use? And that lets you, the more you understand that, it, and it's also freeing. It's like, oh my gosh, they just talk to it like a normal person. So the more you speak like a person, the better the results you get. So everything they're doing and it's really, it's always amazing because I'll say, show me one of your prompt chains. And I look at the answers and I go, oh my gosh, you're killing it. You're doing so good. So that's like my favorite type of guest to have on the podcast. That's my favorite type of person to meet because what they're doing is absolutely amazing and they don't even realize it because they don't know that AI is hard for everyone else.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to do it. I have to use AI as like a data processor before, take in documents and other things to get really specific results out. And when it gets down to that, it feels more like programming than chatting, and it is very frustrating. Do you run into that too?
Yeah, if you stick, here's what's weird. You shove a personality into one of those and you're going to get a much better result again. It's wild.
And are there some automations that are better for AI like this or worse? And what's the difference?
So 90% of what I do is drawing a diagram, a flow chart. So you have to first understand what the real problem is. People will often describe what they want poorly. So they'll try and translate it into like a prompt or kind of tell you what they want. It's like somebody who comes to the doctor and already knows what prescription they want, but that's not what they have. So you have to first explain, oh, you've got something else going on. So I have to do a lot of diagnosis, which is I try to figure out where is the starting point. So, for example, are you transcribing your phone calls? Yes. Well, what do you do with the transcripts? I have no idea. Okay. So now I know we have the starting data point. The starting data point for what I'm going to build is I have to find these transcripts and put them into place. They could trigger an automation. That's the beginning of the automation. And then I find out what's the ideal, what's the result you want. And I call this ideal result. So when I'm solving algebra, if you tell me A times B equals C, I only need to know two of those letters, what they mean, and I can solve it. I can know A and B, I can know A and C, or B and C. So if I know your raw data and I have an example of what you want. So I have an AI that creates my show notes. And here's how I wrote my show notes prompt. I said, here's the transcript from last week's episode, and here's the show notes. Please create the prompt, which is B, right? Raw data times prompt equals output. I said, please write me the prompt that would have caused you to write the show notes that look like this. And then the next time I could just say, here's the raw data, here's this week's transcript, here's the prompt, give me the show notes. And they match the formatting and they look perfect. So I approach it that way. That's how I kind of build my automations out. Those are the two components. So first I think about what are the steps that have to happen. So it's almost like describing a Rube Goldberg machine, right? We break it down into smaller pieces. Once you do that, then then you solve one piece at a time. That's really the big secret. And that's the actual implementation is not valuable. There's tons of programmers out there, right? How many people know Python? Millions. And there's a lot of people that have problems. So it's the in between. And actually, I had a conversation with one of the programmers on my AI team last week. He's like, he goes, when you describe what you want, I know exactly what you mean. He goes, most people, I don't. That doesn't happen. So programmers, and you always wonder why programmers and bosses get frustrated. This is why, because one of them is speaking English and one of them is speaking Pig Latin. And it's like, it's close to the same language. A lot of the words sound the same, but you move the beginning to the end, right? So this is where a lot of frustration happens. So most people, when you say, ask them like, what do you want to happen? So when I'm like diagnosing with someone, I'll say, so when A happens, then you want B, then C, then D, then E is the ideal output. And they'll go, no, or they'll go, yes. And when I say yes, I figured it out. So that breakdown, and then I draw it down. I do it all by hand. I draw on notebooks and then I take a picture and send it to my team. But that's really how I break it down. And then we can put it into an automation tool, which does step one, then step two, then step three. If you go straight to coding and then you find out, and I'm sure this has happened to you, you build something and someone goes, now that I see this, I realize I wanted something completely different.
Yep.
So people always say they want social media bots. And I go, great. Here's what I need to see. What data do you have to start a post? What's the piece of information that triggers the beginning of the automation? And then what's the ideal output? Show me a great post. And if I have those two things, then we can build the machine. But if I don't have those things, we have a problem. Like some people go, I go, what do you want to post about? I don't know. Okay, well, you already have a problem. It's always people who come to me and say, I'm sorry. Usually there's the easiest to build for because they'll say, I know this
Mm.
is a lot of steps. Here's the exact steps in my process. Here's everything that I do in an SOP and then build an AI. I'm like, yeah, you gave me an instruction, but that's super easy. That's like the easiest thing because I know exactly what you want. Even though you want really hard things, people don't understand what's hard or not hard with AI. So it's
Yeah.
usually when I tell people, I go, don't worry about if you think it's hard or not. Just tell me what you want. And just the more I can get to where's the starting point of the process, which is the end point of what you finished, and where's the ideal output? What do you want on the other side? Then I can build. And that's really the gap I build. And that's what I do. That's what automations are. And then as part of that, there's agents sometimes. Usually it's like, I'll give you an example, like someone wants me to do something with their transcript. So I have an agent that figures out which categories this fall into. So it's a conversation with their wife, don't use it, right? It's just a conversation with an investor, an existing customer, a potential customer? Is this a private conversation? Does this need to be erased? Because there's information like so it will do the sorting, and AI can sort very well. So that might be a step that the first AI does. Then the next AI transcribes it and checks the transcription, and then will data match. So it might look at your Google Calendar to make sure it has the correct spelling of the name and the correct email address before it passes on to the next step. Things like that.
Hmm. Well, Last question for me. What is hard with AI and what is easy? Is there a way that you can describe that?
Usually something that's hard, it's because there's no endpoint or that the thing that they want doesn't exist yet because there's something about it. I'll give you an example of this. There's a bunch of companies that make slide generators using AI, and only one of them connects to automations. Only one of them has an API. So only one of them will let you send a command from an AI to their AI to make the slides. And it's this recursive thing. I gave another example is if you try to list your business using Google My Business, there's no AI categories. And it's like you guys are literally have you're one of the largest AI companies in the world and you don't have that as an option. They might have it now. This was last year. So it's like you often find that like they never there's no self-reflection. So there are certain things that's one of the things that's very difficult. Voice right now is very difficult. And certain things people want to the problem with automating social media, for example, is that it's very subjective. There was I guess it's a scandal where someone had an AI send out a joke to every customer
Yeah, I
and
saw that.
it's like, well, first of all, it doesn't even have to be that. If you just tell an American joke to a Canadian, you immediately have a possibility of misinterpretation, right? You introduce a possibility, and and that's two humans from two different regions. It doesn't have to be it can be an American from Florida to American New York can even be that, right? So once you start adding in more, you increase the risk the more layers there are. So what two people think is funny is very, very, very different. So you have to tell certain types of jokes to certain type of people in certain types of situation, right? There's jokes you could never tell at work that are great in a comedy club, right? And that's so there's an environmental element. So I can send you an email with a joke in it that if you get it to your personal email address, you'll be laughing. And if you get it at your work email address, you'll forward it to HR. Same email, right? So it's understanding a huge part of comedy is situational. And what's funny is the person should have just said to ChatGPT, I'm thinking of having you write a joke to every one of my customers and send it to them. Is this a good idea? And the AI would have gone, no, that's a terrible idea. Are you crazy? Don't do that. And that's the thing is that you never think of doing that earlier checksum by you just say, is this a good idea to an AI? Because AI will go, I don't know about this one. This sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah. And that goes back to what you said about asking it to ask you questions, asking it for input in the process and not just using it as a command order bot.
Yeah. Because what in that situation, it's like, what was the actual goal? I don't think the goal was to tell a joke. I think the goal was to achieve an emotional response was I want to do something that makes all of my customers feel a certain way. And maybe it's laughter. If you say that, then it will design a different idea because the AI didn't know the real result. The person said, I want you to tell a joke. It's not what he actually wanted, as he found out later on. And that's what's really important is so when you, and this is the difference, right? I mentioned people that are great at prompting. They would just say, oh, I want to write a letter to my friend that makes her laugh. How can we do that? And they get a great result because they've given a bunch of information. They've said it's to my friend. I want to make her, it's a laugh. It's a woman. You have all this data for it and you can get a sense of your connection to the person. So that's just the difference between like computer style prompting and friendship style prompting.
Friendship style prompting. I like that term. Well, Jonathan, we're at time, so I just wanted to give you a few minutes to tell us what you are working on now, anything you'd like to share, and how we can stay in touch with you.
The best place to chat with me is on LinkedIn. That's where I do all my posting. That's where I do most of my stuff. You can see my book, Chat to You Profits, on Amazon. And what I'm working on right now, I'm working on a lot of things to, I've just been working on some concepts in the areas of like medical stuff about how I can build agents that help people with different challenges in the mental health field to overcome those. So I've been working on some really cool concepts where an agent goes beyond you like theoretical usefulness and into real usefulness. So that's like what I'm working on this year.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Really appreciated our chat. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
I started this podcast because I wanted to stand at the gate of businesses using AI and see what separated hype from lasting impact. Back when cities had walls, you had to go into the city to do business at the market. So, if you wanted to talk to someone, you waited by the gate until they came in or came out. Do that enough times and you could talk to everyone. That's what I want to do. Stand at the gate of people doing business with AI and talk to them, see what they do and why they do it. If you know someone that's making an impact in the world of AI, would you connect them with me? You can find me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at daniel@manary.house. That's Daniel@MANARY.HAUS. Thanks for listening.